Okay, so we're jumping ahead a couple of chapters because COVID stuff is throwing our schedule a little bit off kilter. So we're starting chapter 23, lesson 1. President Wilson had some political experience before he became president. He was the governor, so he was in charge of the entire state of New Jersey. So he had some political experience. I mean, if he's able to run an entire state, maybe he'll be able to run the whole country. During that time, he was pretty successful at fighting against corruption and political bosses. President Wilson was also pretty good at getting Congress to pass the laws he wanted. So if you've been watching the news lately, Congress is having a really hard time passing this coronavirus package, or the coronavirus stimulus bill. And maybe if President Wilson was the president, he'd be able to convince them to move a little bit faster to get something done. He created something called the Federal Reserve System, which is a national banking system. The 17th Amendment got passed. Lots of stuff happened during the time he was president. So, things are moving pretty fast in America. We talked about how the cities are growing, more and more people are moving there. They're exciting places with lots of opportunity, but also lots of challenges. But things are changing around the world as well. For many years, countries in Europe had been competing for trade markets. So competing on where they could sell their products. And that caused lots of fights over territory. One country would take property from another country and would go back and forth fighting on where these actual borders were between the countries. Some of these countries wanted to get back land they had lost in previous wars. Some of these small countries wanted independence from the large countries that ruled them. So these countries all start building up their armies. And when people are building up their armies, getting the weapons ready, you get a little bit nervous because there's potential for a war. So what happens, there's a country called Bosnia. And Bosnia was part of Austria-Hungary. But a lot of people in Bosnia didn't want to be part of Austria-Hungary. They wanted to be part of Serbia, which was their neighboring country. They felt like they had more in common with them. But what happens is the people of Bosnia start talking about a rebellion. And if you remember, a rebellion is when somebody or some people go against something. So the emperor, his name is Francis Joseph, sends his nephew, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, to Sarajevo. So he sends him over to these countries where there's the potential for the rebellion, sends his nephew to go over there and kind of squash things, calm things down, and try to figure out why the people want a rebellion. So he's sent there to try to stop this from turning into a big conflict. He wants him to, keep the peace. So what happens? The nephew, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, is taking part in a parade. And one of his cars, driving through this parade, and someone throws a bomb at his car. And the bomb blows up, but it's too late to get Francis Ferdinand. It actually hits the people behind him. So, a couple hours later, this guy, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, he feels bad about the innocent people who got hurt when somebody was trying to hurt him. So he's on his way to visit them at the hospital. And on his way to visit them, somebody recognizes him. A guy named Gavrilo Princip sees Archduke Francis Ferdinand and pulls out a gun and he shoots Francis Ferdinand and his wife. So imagine this. The leader of Austria-Hungary sent his nephew to try to keep the peace, and they killed his nephew. So what is he going to want? He blames Serbia for his nephew's death, and he declares war on Serbia. So what happens, once one country, Austria-Hungary, declares war, it starts a chain reaction. So if you think about this, if a fight starts between two people, sometimes it doesn't stay between two people. If one person jumps in to help their friend, and somebody might jump in to help the other guy, and that starts a chain reaction where a fight that starts off with 2 people could end up with 15 or 20 people. So Russia decides to help Serbia defend itself. Germany decides to help Austria defend itself against Russia. France agrees to help Russia and plans to attack Germany. Germany then declares war on France, and Belgium gets caught in the middle, so Germany says, you know what, we're going to attack Belgium too. Great Britain gets involved and they declare war on Germany to help protect France and Belgium. So, starts off with this one guy sending his nephew to keep the peace, and when his nephew gets killed, it drags 7 countries at war. So there's 2 teams during this war. There's the Central Powers, which is going to be Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Bulgaria, and the Allied Powers, which is going to be Great Britain, France, Serbia, Belgium, and Russia. Now, Japan, they support the Allies, but they're not really involved in the fighting. They're hoping they can get some benefits from, the aftermath of this fight. Italy is going to get involved a little bit later too. So the war spread across most of Europe and even into parts of Africa and Asia. Even a lot of these smaller countries are getting involved. Countries that weren't involved directly in the conflict are still going to be affected by this war. So this fighting is mostly going on in Europe, and it's far away from us. President Wilson says, you know what? We're not getting involved. We're not going to join this fight. But we are going to sell war supplies to whoever needs them. So we say we're not getting involved, but then we start selling weapons to the people who are fighting. So the question is, are we really staying out of it if we're giving them weapons? Hundreds of ships sail across the Atlantic Ocean and sell war supplies to France and Great Britain. And Germany gets upset. They say, you know what? You said you were staying out of it, but you're selling weapons pretty much to one team. The British Navy does not want us to sell weapons to Germany. If you think about this, you wouldn't want somebody giving your enemy a weapon. So every time we send a ship to go sell some weapons to Germany, the British Navy is stopping us. They set up these things called war zones, where if our ships would enter these areas, they would blow them up. Germany also set up war zones around Great Britain. Germany says, you know what, we don't want you selling weapons to our enemy either. So they set up these war zones, and Germany had these new types of boats called submarines. And the submarines were dangerous because they would be underwater, and you would not have any idea where they were. You would think that you were sailing through an open ocean with nobody around you, and then all of a sudden a torpedo hits you and blows up your boat. So President Wilson thinks that this is illegal for them to attack our ships because all we are doing is selling weapons. He believes that anybody should be able to sail in the ocean and sell their goods. So nobody owns the ocean. So technically he's right, but we're in a tricky position because you can't tell people you're staying out of something if you're selling weapons to all the people who are fighting. So the Central Powers appear to be defeating the Allied Powers. And the Allied Powers actually have some of the countries that are our friends on them. So we start getting worried. We say we're staying out of it, but now our friends are losing. So we have a difficult decision to make. Do we continue to stay out, or do we get involved in a fight that really doesn't involve us? So something happens. There's a ship called the Lusitania. It's a British ship, and it is traveling from New York to England. So this is supposed to be a passenger ship, which means it's got regular people on it. It's not a military ship. It's not supposed to have war supplies, and it's supposed to be just sending people from one place to the other. So this ship, the Lusitania, gets close, and Germany ends up firing a torpedo and sinking the Lusitania. So why would they do that if it didn't have weapons on it, if it only had passengers and civilians? So almost 1,200 people died. 128 of them were American citizens. So now this war going on has killed 120 Americans. So we still have to decide, is that enough to bring us into the fight, or do we continue to stay out? So the American people were shocked and upset. Some people thought we should declare war. But President Wilson sends a letter to Germany, and he basically tells them that that ship was just carrying people and you shouldn't have attacked it. Those were civilians. And Germany says, no, that ship had weapons on it too. And it is very possible the ship did have weapons on it, and they were using that ship with the people to kind of sneak the weapons in. So when the Lusitania was sunk, that turned the Americans against Germany, and a lot of people in America, a lot of citizens, wanted us to get involved in the fight. They thought we needed to go and get revenge for them killing our people. Germany realizes they're winning, but if we join, that could change the tides of the war. And Germany basically promises, they say, you know what? We'll be more careful. We won't sink the ships without a warning from now on. So, Woodrow Wilson ran for re-election. He's kept us out of the war so far, and a lot of people like that. They don't want us to get involved in a war. Most Americans say, you know what? We shouldn't get involved in this war. This is a terrible situation. He used the slogan, he kept us out of war. So, Woodrow Wilson won re-election. The election was close, but it was really important for the Democratic Party. He was the first Democrat to be re-elected since Andrew Jackson. So this guy, Woodrow Wilson, so far has kept us out of a conflict that has involved tons of different countries and is affecting multiple different continents. He's done a pretty good job keeping us out of the fight so far. But if we keep selling weapons, it's really hard to stay out of this conflict. Okay, guys, so I need you to go into Google Classroom, and you're going to knock out the worksheet for Chapter 23, Lesson 1 and 2. Since they didn't have indoor plumbing, that's their bathroom.